And
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Burns, and welcome to our WrestleMania talk. Today, we're just going to be talking about different things to do with WrestleMania, maybe some of our favorite moments. Um, just everything WrestleMania. But before we get started with that, there's another thing we want to talk about. But before we even get to that, and before I even introduce my co-host, I just want to explain why I wasn't live yesterday. I did put a post on my uh, community part of my page on YouTube just to sort of explain, but I thought I'd just explain here. On Tuesday when I finished work, while I was at work and when I finished work, I really wasn't feeling great. In terms of illness and in terms of my mental health, I just really wasn't with it at all, and I just thought all I wanted to do was get in bed when I got home from work, and that's exactly what I did, and I didn't get out. So I thought, well, I'm feeling like that. I'm not going to force myself to stream. So I didn't. Luckily, I go through this every now and then, as you will know if you've been following my channel for a while. I get bouts of depression that just come from nowhere, and can't really be controlled. And yesterday was one of them times. But then I woke up today, went to work, felt quite a bit better than I did yesterday, and I feel all right now. So luckily, it was just a day thing. I apologise if I let anybody down. I mean, it was only NXT. It wasn't anything massive that we missed. But yeah, I do apologise about that. But we're back here today. And before we get into the first topic of the day, let me introduce you, of course, as always, to my co host for these streams. Um, it is the Real Soft Cat, formerly known as Professor Wigglytuff.
oh yeah,
Jesus.
hello everybody. Sorry, that's my terrible Macho Man Randy Savage impression, but hope everything's all right. It's Wednesday. You know what that means.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we're halfway
Mm,
through the week,
yeah,
and WrestleMania weekend is almost upon us.
it is.
It is, and we've got a lot to talk about, I'm sure. So we best crack on.
Okay, well, first thing we are going to talk about, it's something that's not WrestleMania related, which is why we'll talk about it first, and then we'll get into the WrestleMania stuff. And it's something that my co-host brought to my attention yesterday, and I'm going to let my co-host lead on this. But it's to do with Oasis being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that's all I'm going to say on it at the moment. I'll give my opinion after, but I'm going to let my co-host lead this.
Yeah, I mean, this came as a welcome surprise, given that when I cast my vote weeks ago, they were lagging far behind in the polling. But much to my surprise, my pleasant surprise, not only Oasis, but also Joy Division and New Order. Another great Manchester band, both into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And, first of all, many congratulations. It's the culmination of a lifelong sort of commitment to their craft, creating iconic music and an iconic sound known all over the world. And, some might say, except, no pun intended, but some might say, this is the sort of thing that was like holding Oasis back from being formally recognised globally. I mean, they were big globally, of course, but obviously, the better or worse, bands are always measured on things like this. Whether it's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, winning Grammys, how big they are in America, and I think it's safe to say that you know Oasis now can take their place amongst the greatest of all time, in my humble opinion. I've always been of the opinion that I viewed Oasis as better than the Beatles. Now, statistically, obviously, probably isn't true, for a variety of reasons, but nevertheless, I think we can now talk about Oasis. In that, if we weren't already doing so, I already was, but we can now talk about Oasis in the same breath as if there were only three bands that I could put above Oasis, it would probably be the Beatles, Queen, and the Rolling Stones. And we can firmly put them in that bracket. And what a great achievement. And also, Joy Division and New Order, who have both been inducted under one category, given that obviously New Order were made up of pretty much Joy Division. Well, their existing members, as it were. And it was great to see them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Again, two bands whose music, or three, if we're talking about Joy Division as a separate entity as well, three bands whose music really shaped not only the UK music scene, the Manchester music scene, but the global music scene. I lose track of how many memorable songs I can name by Oasis. New Order and Joy Division, their music synonymous with Manchester. Love Will Tear Us Apart, and then you got New Order, with Blue Monday, and obviously every World Cup, World in Motion. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic achievement. They join now the pantheon of the great bands and acts of all time, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And yeah, Liam Gallagher in the past used to say it was only for wankers, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, until he got inducted. And now it's no longer for wankers. So well done. And yes, well done to the other British acts that got inducted as well. I believe Sade and Phil Collins and some others as well. I can't remember, and I'm not too bothered about, to be honest. Oh, and also the Wu-Tang Clan, who I actually was a big fan of back in the day. So, but this is about Oasis. This is about Joy Division and New Order. They beat out some big acts. I think they beat out Mariah Carey and Shakira to get inducted this year. So that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. But I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Well, I have to say, when my co-host told me about this last night, I was very pleasantly surprised. I'll be quite honest, I don't really keep up to date with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when votes are being done or anything like that. So obviously I haven't voted. I didn't even know they were up there as a contender to be inducted. So to hear this was a very pleasant surprise. And there's no secret that I'm a massive, massive Oasis fan. In some of my streams last year, you will have heard me talk about, when I went to see them on their reunion tour at Eaton Park, in July. What an amazing, amazing experience. And I'm so glad I got to see them at Eaton Park in their hometown. I think that made it all the more special as well. And then, even before I went, and the streams I did before, you will have heard me talking about how excited I was to go to watch them. And the fact that I got tickets was absolutely unbelievable, because it was so hard to get tickets. So the fact that I got tickets, especially to their hometown gig, was amazing. And the gig was amazing. I've been to a fair few gigs over the last few years. I'm sort of a latecomer when it comes to gigs. In my 20s, I sort of Um, I had really bad anxiety when it come to crowds, so I sort of stayed away from gigs. But then when I got to 30, I decided it was time to push through some of my fears, and I did, and I pushed through some of my anxieties, some of my fears, and now it doesn't bother me. I haven't got anxiety of crowds anymore, and now I'm happily enjoying gigs on a semi-regular occasion, and obviously Oasis was one of them. Um, but yeah, it was probably the best gig I've ever been to, and there's no doubt in my mind. And I'd happily pay to go and see them again if they do more shows, which I assume they will do at some point. But just so happy for them that they've got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, alongside New Order and Joy Division, two bands who I quite like as well. Not as much as Oasis, but I do like them. They've got some good songs, and they help shape the music. Um, help shape music, especially in Manchester. So
And
very,
just a
very,
quick mention of the other British inductees into the Hall of Fame this year, a record 6 were inducted, including Joy Division and New Order and Oasis. So we have Phil Collins. Not a massive fan of his music, but I don't
I
think.
didn't even know he was British.
Fair enough. But no sort of introduction needed for Phil Collins. Billy Idol in there, one of the a pioneer of the
Yeah,
British punk invasion into America. Sade, admittedly, who I don't know a lot about, but well done for them. Iron Maiden, again, a massive band, a band that I'm not really a fan of, but nevertheless, um, they are an iconic name, an iconic band, and deservedly in there. The late soul singer Luther Vandross, he's in there. And as I mentioned earlier, the Wu Tang Clan. And interestingly, the Wu Tang Clan, Luther Vandross, and Phil Collins. This was the first year in which they were eligible to be nominated, and they got in. Or the
yeah,
first year they were nominated and they got in. Oasis had been nominated, I believe, twice before, in 2024 and 2025, and missed out. Joy Division, New Order had been nominated in 23 and 25 and missed out. Um, and Iron Maiden were nominated in 2021 and 2023 and had missed out. So, well done to all of them for
yeah,
getting in. And look, I often, at the best of times, I take these stupid Hall of Fame things with a pinch of salt because certainly from a WWE perspective, it's not actually done by the fans, or it's not done by a group of journalists, it's not done by a group of esteemed individuals within the industry who then come together and say who should be there in on merit. The WWE Hall of Fame has always been about who WWE wants in there. Now, obviously there are things like the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, which obviously has a different method of inducting its inductees, but nevertheless, WWE being the biggest wrestling brand in the world, their Hall of Fame effectively is the de facto or definitely the unofficial Wrestling Hall of Fame. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that at least with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this is done by the fans.
yeah,
People voted online. I certainly cast my vote. Um, Admittedly, I think the ones that I did vote for were the Wu Tang Clan, Oasis, and Joy Division, New Order. I think Mariah Carey and Shakira are on there. Don't say it out loud, but I did vote for them as well. um, but yeah, nevertheless, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a massive achievement, and people always talk about Oasis's legacy of, but they didn't break into America like the Beatles did, or the likes of Queen or the Rolling Stones, but you know they were still pretty big worldwide, and arguably you could say that with their reunion gigs, they did manage to do what they couldn't do, which was do sellout shows in America.
mm,
And off the back of that, they've got into the Hall of Fame, and well done to them. It is an achievement. I haven't looked at the local press in Manchester to see what, like say the Manchester Evening News's reaction was. If you're able to bring it up on your screen, feel free to do so. But look, it's a great achievement. It's a great achievement. Three great Manchester bands will now forever be in this Hall of Fame, and it has a physical site in Cleveland, Ohio. If you ever get to visit, they will be on display there forever for future generations to marvel. And well done to them. Well
Yeah,
done to them. For a couple of working class lads from Burnage. Who would have thought? They'd go all the way to being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
I
and
know.
that's always good to have some Man City fans in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame
You
as
had
well.
to bring that up, didn't you?
Of course, of course. But Liam Gallagher has said he will attend the ceremony, so that'll be interesting. I don't know if Noel Gallagher will be, but in the past, Oasis have had their spats with Phil Collins as well. Phil Collins, very outspoken about his politics, and would say that if his political party weren't in power, he would go to Switzerland. He'd go and live in Switzerland.
Yeah.
So Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher, one of them, probably Liam Gallagher because he's the naughtiest, would therefore encourage people to vote for the party that Phil Collins doesn't want, so that Phil Collins would get out the country and go to Switzerland. So it'll be interesting to see how they both interact with each other. I'm sure it will be fine. But yeah, it's a great achievement, and yeah, they're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'll I'll just continue on just a little bit longer, and then we'll get on with the WrestleMania chat. But yeah, it is. It's an amazing achievement, not just for Oasis, but for Joy Division and New Order. Absolutely, very impressive. I've always, since becoming a fan of Oasis, I've always seen them as not only one of the best bands of all time, but one of the biggest. And this rock and roll, induction, Hall of Fame induction, just sort of cements that. The whole they never broke America, they can't sell shows out in America thing was completely debunked, especially when they returned and did a load of reunion gigs overseas, not just in America, but overseas in lots of different places. And every single show, wherever it was in the world, sold out. If that doesn't scream that they are worldwide, I don't know what will. But obviously, if we're being honest, they aren't as big as the Beatles. They haven't got some of the records that the Beatles have got. Not in terms of records like songs. I mean records in like the broken records and stuff like that. And they're not as big as the Rolling Stones.
I mean, let's just put this out there. Let's just say this. The Beatles were not just a band; they were cultural and, dare I even say, historical icons. They changed the face of music forever with a unique sound. Each of
Absolutely.
those members became superstars in their own right. You
Yeah.
know, particularly obviously, John Lennon, who infamously or famously declared himself as bigger than Jesus, but he was a superstar. He was an icon. I'm personally not a massive fan of the guy. Or his music. I'm more of a fan of Paul McCartney. Again, a larger than life iconic individual. These are people who, still to this day are recognized all over the world.
Yeah.
Oasis were big, but, even as a hardcore Oasis fan, I would never for one moment, and I hate to say this, consider Liam and Noel Gallagher on the same level as John Lennon
No.
or Paul McCartney or even Freddie Mercury or Sir Mick Jagger.
No.
These are iconic names who, you know, whoever listens to music, you just have to mention their name and they know who you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I do think that Oasis are one of the best bands of all time and one of the biggest bands of all time, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I think we
yeah,
can fittingly say they are in the top
yeah,
five British bands of all time. I mean, in my opinion,
yeah.
if
I
you're
mean,
going to ask me who
go
I
on.
think the top five British bands of all time are, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Oasis, Queen, and Coldplay.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm talking just in general. Like I'm talking about worldwide. Like they are one of the
Oh, of
biggest
course,
bands of
yeah.
all time,
Yeah.
and it's amazing to see, that they like you said, two working class lads who literally, were singing in pubs, just small pubs where people would go in and get a pint and wouldn't even really fully focus on the music. They'd go in and they'd perform. And there's a story that I learned, and I'll sort of finish on this and then we'll get into the WrestleMania chat. But there's a story that I learned from one of my friends, who he knew somebody who had told this story. And basically, this woman she owned a pub, um, in Manchester. I can't remember whereabouts in Manchester, but I would imagine it's where the boys grew up. Um, and basically, they'd been performing in like a few different pubs and hadn't really got that sort of, they hadn't got the response that they wanted. But this woman who owned this pub, it was a relatively well known pub that a lot of people went to, and it was quite a big pub. So if they were going to make it, like this was the pub to go and perform at, where they would actually get their name out there, and where people actually took notice of the music. And she was umming and ahhing about whether to let the boys perform, and they went there a few times. Said, "Look, we've performed in a few pubs, can't really get it clicking with the people that we perform with. Have not really been fully focusing on the music, but we know that this pub is well known for for people performing, and people actually do listen to the music. So this would be the perfect pub for us. We really want to perform here because this is might be our chance at at making it. Anyway, in the end, they sort of went back on, they went back a few times and asked her and asked her and asked her. And then in the end, she said, look, okay, I'll give you a chance, but this is your one and only chance. If it fails, you're not performing here again. And what happened? They performed at that pub, big, and the rest is history. They performed at that pub, and, you know, that was it. Like, people spread the word about how amazing these two brothers were. And then before long, record deal, and boom, Oasis was born. And it's amazing to think that that woman had that power. Like, if she hadn't let them perform, would they have ever made it? Maybe they would have. Maybe they would have gone to another pub, and maybe they would have made it in that other pub. But maybe they wouldn't. So it's a really interesting story, and from that story all the way to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, what a journey they've been on, and it's good that they're back on the same page now. It's good that they're brothers again, and actually acting like brothers. And congratulations to them. And it's well deserved. And of course for the rest of the uh, inductees as well. But I think let's move on to our WrestleMania chat now. That's what this whole stream is for. So we've spent the first half an hour talking about that. Let's get into the WrestleMania talk. So I had an idea of what to start us off with, and it's something we were talking about the other day, and it's quite a it's a thing that's going to get a lot of, well, maybe get a lot of response from the people in the chat or in the comments afterwards. But you were talking to me the other day, about, I can't remember what day it was, but you were talking to me the other day about your opinions on WrestleMania 17, and that you think that people overhype WrestleMania 17 and it's not as good as people make out. Because when you ask a lot of people what's their favorite WrestleMania, 17 is the one they go for. A lot of people say the same thing, and don't get me wrong, we both agreed it's a great WrestleMania, but you had some other points as to why you think that it's overhyped and it's not as good as it is, as people say it is. So we'll start off with that, and I'll let you run with your
Yeah,
opinion.
it's coincidental that you should ask me that, because earlier this evening I was actually watching something on YouTube that was kind of like dissecting WrestleMania 17, and
Yeah,
it got up to the last bit, about the Stone Cold The Rock match, and obviously spoiler warnings for anyone that hasn't seen it. But obviously, as we all know, Stone Cold won the main event with a little bit of help from Vince McMahon. Completely left The Rock in a bloody mess. And Austin did the unthinkable and, joined forces with Vince McMahon, his long-term enemy, as it were. And, when I come to think about it and I look back on it again, I will say this much. I do think of all the WrestleManias that I have seen in my lifetime, WrestleMania 17 does stand out as the best one. And objectively, as a card from start to finish, it was a great card. You look at the superstars who were on that card. They were all at the peaks of their career. They all put on good matches, great matches. A couple of duds here and there. Even had a gimmick battle royal. It was the first time they were back in a stadium for a very long time. But I think what really made it stand out, and I will reiterate the point again, it was a combination of factors. I think number one, it was at the apex of the Monday Night Wars. And indeed, in that particular week, the Monday Night Wars came to an end as WWE, shocked the wrestling world and changed the landscape of wrestling forever by purchasing their long-term rivals WCW, effectively forcing WCW out of business. That was just something, to say those words, to put those words together, was just unthinkable. When you think just a few years back, 3 years back, they were in the major scrap for existence. There were times where WWE were actually had their backs against the wall and could have gone out of business. So popular was the NWO storyline, so popular was, the rise of Sting, Goldberg, WCW, anyone who, these days, obviously, you got YouTube to see all these matches, but unless you actually experienced it there and then, a lot of people will never appreciate just how popular the NWO was, or, for better or for worse, how popular a heel Hulk Hogan was, or how popular Sting was, or Goldberg. People tend to shit on Goldberg these days for various reasons. Some will listen to Bret Hart, others will look at his sort of, comeback matches, as it were, and refer to him as Oldberg. But Goldberg was genuinely a massive, massive superstar. His popularity was on par, and it's not inaccurate for me to say this. It was on par with Steve Austin. It was on par with The Rock. There is a reason why on his debut he was thrown instantly into a main event with The Rock. Goldberg was a main event guy, and for WWE to come out on top, that was a crowning achievement. We talked about the Hall of Fame. We talk about football World Cups. This was like WWE not only winning the treble, but winning the World Cup, winning it all. It all came together. The stars aligned perfectly. The Attitude Era, which began in 97, 98, with the Montreal Screwjob. And then here we are, this was basically the end of the Attitude Era. And what fitting way to end it than by not only the two figureheads of that era, but arguably two of the greatest superstars of all time. In my opinion, the two superstars who effectively changed the course of wrestling history, who took WWE back on the road to success, who allowed them to overtake WCW in the ratings and effectively put them out of business. When you have time, go back. It's worth watching WrestleMania 17 just to watch the promo package. And here's another thing I will say. The one thing WWE has really struggled, and wrestling in general has struggled to do since the end of the Attitude Era, is put on a good storyline. Now, what I mean by that as well is the video packages that build up to a story. You have to go back and watch. Maybe we will have time to do this. You have to go back and watch that video package that built up to that Stone Cold and The Rock feud. using Limp Bizkit's "My Way" as its soundtrack. It was basically a moment in time. It was the apex of the Attitude Era. The two biggest stars in wrestling at that time, new metal. I mean, gosh, that was 25 years ago now. So there might be a lot of younger listeners tuning in who don't know what new metal is. Go ask your older brothers or your dads or your cousins or whoever. New metal was massive at the time, and the biggest bands at the time, with that were the likes of Linkin Park and of course Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst. So to have that as a soundtrack, it was just like it summed up that moment in time, the turn of the 20th century into the 21st century, wrestling coming into a new era. That's why people look at WrestleMania 17 as this great event, and it is. Don't get me wrong, it is. It's not as brilliant as people make it out to be. It wasn't perfect. There were some matches you could just easily take away off the card. There were some matches I would have made better. There were some feuds I would have made better. In my honest opinion, I think it was a bad move turning Stone Cold heel. But, maybe they needed a shocking moment for it to end in that way. I mean, perhaps there was no way that Stone Cold was going to come out of a Texas WrestleMania not as the champion, which was unfortunate for me because I desperately wanted The Rock to win. And also it adds to that statistic that The Rock never won, and you can go and check this out to make sure, The Rock never won a WWE or a World title or Universal title match or whatever the top title would have been in his entire run at WrestleMania. And I hope I've not got sidetracked here. I hope you're all still following what I'm saying. But I would say that sums up why WrestleMania 17 was seen as so great as it was.
Yeah.
And I hope, obviously that point has come across to you. These were two wrestlers in their prime. This wasn't like The Rock coming out of semi-retirement to face John Cena again, or John Cena being a part-time wrestler to come back and face Cody Rhodes and win title number 17. These were two wrestlers at the peak of their powers.
Yeah.
This would have been like, I don't know, in footballing terms. I mean, I'm just trying to think. It would be like a peak Man City versus a peak Manchester United in a Champions League final. Or it would have been like an Arsenal Manchester United final, like in the 90s. This was, like I said, if we do go back and watch WrestleMania 17 or clips from it, have a watch of it and, see if you agree with me. Even just the build up to the Stone Cold Rock match, the more I think about it, and, obviously you mentioned about me picking what we would watch in terms of a WrestleMania or to discuss.
Yeah.
I thought about it, and I think it's a no-brainer, given especially that it is now, would you believe, 25 years. 25 years ago now, that was the end of the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
25 years ago, The Rock and Steve Austin main evented WrestleMania for the last time. Well, together. Not necessarily for the last time, but main evented WrestleMania for the last time together. It was a moment in time. It was a moment that changed the industry forever because, after that night, WWE purchasing WCW, wrestling changed forever.
Mm.
And it arguably hasn't been the same since. Yes, AEW have come along and they are, I think it is safe to say they are the number 2 brand, but by a considerable distance. Nobody in their right mind would suggest that they are on par as a product with WWE. But they survive because they have resources. I mean, I've just seen today AEW have signed a deal with the NFL to produce NFL/AEW tie-in merch, just like WWE have done with the NFL. So, well, of course, the Khans own the Jacksonville Jaguars, so they have resources, they have connections. You could argue that AEW right now are bigger than WCW could have ever been, just not in terms of ratings.
Yeah.
And I think, this is a point I also want to make, given that obviously tonight is Dynamite night as well. I think AEW will survive, at least for another few more years. The only reason I could see it not surviving would be if the Khans suddenly turn around and think, you know what, we're bored of this now. We're just going to close it down, or we're going to sell it on. But I think AEW has a place in the industry now. I mean, TNA survived for this long.
It's true.
And let's be brutally honest, I don't think there was ever a moment in time where TNA was actually any good. I actually think it's been crap. Excuse my language, it's been crap its entire existence. The only thing that kept it afloat was because Sting, really. And then you had some wrestlers come through there, like your CM Punks, like your Drew McIntyres, like your AJ Styles, um, any other people you can name, R-Truth.
Yeah.
Loads of people came through there, came to WWE, vice versa. And, TNA have pulled pulled a blinder by, signing their deal with WWE. So, I know you're not a big fan of AEW, but I mean, what's your thoughts on its long-term future? I think it will survive.
Um.
Because I think, obviously, as I said, it ties in with, why does that tie in with WrestleMania 17? As I said, the landscape of wrestling changed forever from that day.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you see, obviously, I'm not an AEW fan. I've tried to watch it, um, time and time again. Mainly just to pay-per-views. And to be honest, I fall asleep every single time. And it's just, for me, the big thing for me is that I don't think that Tony Khan can tell a story to save his life. I think the stories in AEW always have to revolve around shocking moments and blood. And then when the big matches go on, so the main events or like the big matches of the pay per view, there's always has to be shocking moments, whether it be like a really shocking move, whether it be like needles, fucking staples to the head or whatever. Like they're so trying so fucking hard to be everything that WWE isn't, that it just doesn't work. Like if they did it every now and then yeah, it would work. And I don't want to get sidetracked too much because this isn't about AEW, this is about WrestleMania, and we do need to get back on track. However, I just feel like they think what Tony thinks is that he has to do shocking moments in every single match, and that makes up for the lack of story. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, okay, blood sometimes just does make a match, but only if it's a very heated and personal rivalry. Like the last time we saw like mega blood in WWE was when CM Punk and Drew McIntyre were inside Hell in a Cell, and that needed blood. That match was so fucking personal. It needed blood, and it was used in the right way, and it made that match and that rivalry so much more intense, and it made for an amazing ending to a great rivalry. Whereas in AEW, they use blood like it's fucking water running out of a tap. Like that's how much they use it, because that's what they think is going to get attention. That's what they think will make up for the lack of storytelling, and it's just not true. The other thing I have an issue with, and this is the last thing I'm going to say because, like I said, I want to get back on track, is the other thing I have an issue with is the lack of selling in AEW. The amount of time that somebody will hit their big move, whether it be their signature, whether it be their finisher, and the opponent gets up straight away and does their fucking signature or their finisher, and then the opponent will then get up again straight away and do their signature or their finisher, and it just goes on from, and you always, nearly in every single match that I have watched of AEW over the last couple of years, every single time there's always that section in the match where it's just don't fucking sell anything, just fucking do move after move after move. It's not good. It doesn't make the match look good. It doesn't make the match exciting. It just looks fucking stupid because you've got these superstars who have won matches maybe just earlier in the week by using one of their finishers, having people not even fucking get hurt by their finishers and get straight back up and act like nothing's happened. It makes no fucking sense. Anyway, like I said, I'm not going to get into it too much because I could go on and on and on. And like I said, this it's about WrestleMania. It's not about AEW. But I get why you brought it up, and I get your correlation. But yeah, that's my opinions on AEW. And in terms of WrestleMania 17, for me, my opinion sort of are similar to yours. It was a big shocking moment at the end of the WrestleMania where Stone Cold turned heel. Didn't need it. He shouldn't have turned heel, and it didn't work. Like his heel turn didn't work because the crowd didn't really boo him, and he ended up turning face again. So it didn't work. It didn't need to work. It didn't need to happen. Like the rivalry between McMahon and Austin was one of the biggest rivalries in the Attitude Era that could have easily carried on after the Attitude Era.
It was the defining. I would say it was the defining rivalry of that era.
Exactly, it was, and
it's what ushered in the Attitude Era. It was the whole,
yeah,
the debut of the Mr. McMahon character. From I forget the name of the pay-per-view. But yeah, so it was Survivor Series, wasn't it? Where Bret Hart was screwed over, wasn't he? Montreal Screwball.
yeah.
So yeah, it was effectively after that, and like I said, I hope we do get to watch, if not the entirety of WrestleMania 17, at least watch that match and that build-up, because I think
I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to be watching. Well,
basically, I need you to watch that to try and get inside my head and see if you agree with my assessment.
We are planning on watching for WrestleMania, and if that's what you want to do, we can do 17. That's absolutely fine. I'm happy to do that. I think that's too true. Yeah, it would be tomorrow. It's the only other day that's free. So yeah, I mean we can do that. Yeah, I'm happy to do that, to be honest. WrestleMania 17 to me was, it was a pay-per-view full of good matches. It was, the gimmick battle royal was good to see, some legends come back. It was.
I think legends might be a. I mean, yes, some of them were.
Yeah, there were some legends in there. Let's not disrespect them.
I don't think I'd put the Goon as a legend.
No, of course not. Doink was in there. He's a legend.
Well, it depends in what way, but
yeah,
the Iron Sheik, of course.
Yeah, he was a legend.
Sergeant Slaughter, of course.
Legend.
And then the rest of them, I mean, the Gobbledygook,
legend.
Or should I say Hector Guerrero, brother of the late great Eddie Guerrero.
Hola, amigo.
You had Earthquake and Typhoon. Well, Typhoon, the name of Tugboat. You had the Bushwhackers.
Yeah. So yeah, so some like I said, legends. Like not all of them, but there was a fair few legends in there. But it was a.
Kamala.
Yeah, it was a good pay-per-view, and although not massive, I'm not a massive fan of the ending. With Stone Cold turning heel, I still really liked the match. I thought the match between Austin and The Rock was as good as the others that they had done. So it was a good pay-per-view, and I'd put it.
Let's talk about the. Well, let me get your views on the bit that I kind of made the most comment about, which was the build-up to that and the sort of storyline build-up, the package.
I mean, you made a point of like, since then, really, WWE has struggled in terms of storylines. I agree to an extent, like in terms of like the packages and the way they built the stories and stuff like that. That I used to love them video packages before matches because it got you excited for the match. It got the build up of it, replaying everything that's happened, all the personal things that have happened, and it was exciting, and I miss it because this day and age you don't really get that. You might get a 20-second video of oh, well, this happened and they said this. And the only time you really get a package is if it's like a big match. I expect there'll be a package talking a package before the Punk Roman Reigns match because that's a massive match. So I expect there'll be a package there. I expect there'll be a package for the Randy Orton Cody match. It's a massive match, but that'll be it. You won't get any other matches that'll have packages like that, and it's a shame because then
there's only two feuds in my recent memory leading into WrestleMania that have had a massive storyline package, and one was The Rock and John Cena for WrestleMania 28,
yeah,
the whole once
yeah,
in a lifetime, and I
yeah,
think probably for Cody and Roman Reigns Part 2.
yeah, absolutely,
Those
and
are
that
the only two ones. I mean, certainly John Cena Rock once in a lifetime. Yeah, of course, that was a massive one. It was a year-long build-up. They had live musicians perform and everything. It was massive. Yeah, it was. It was on that level. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention another big one. Shawn Michaels Undertaker
yeah,
Part 2 at WrestleMania 26.
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's been times where there's been like one really good story. So the whole Shawn Michaels Undertaker thing where they faced each other at WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels couldn't deal with the fact that he lost at WrestleMania 25, so he tried any way possible to get another match against the Undertaker. In the end, costing the Undertaker the Elimination Chamber match and the World Heavyweight Championship, and that's how they got their match. And it was a great story to go with because Shawn Michaels is Mr. WrestleMania. He's not really used to losing at WrestleMania, although not unbeaten like the Undertaker. He's still, or what the Undertaker was at that time. He is Mr. WrestleMania for a reason. So he couldn't take that loss. He reiterated like, oh, I made one mistake and it cost me the match, and I'm not going to make that mistake again if I get the chance. And I really need a second chance because I know I can beat the Undertaker. I know I can end this streak. Uh, and he was that confident, and he wanted the match that bad that he put his career on the line. And obviously, as we know, he ended up losing it. And that was his final match, apart from the crown jewel one, which we really will not talk about. Um, but yeah, that was a fantastic story. Then, yeah, like you said, you had the John Cena, the Rock rivalry, not just the part one, but the part two as well. I mean, obviously, the part two wasn't as built up as much as the first one because the first one had a year build. Um, um, it's in terms of like, I'm trying to think of others. So yeah, okay, then you obviously John Cena faced The Rock, and it was sort of similar to the way Shawn Michaels' story sort of went, where John Cena couldn't believe that he'd lost against The Rock. He really wanted to face The Rock again. His life fell apart, not just in wrestling, but in his personal life as well. He split with his then wife. They got a divorce. His life just fell apart in that year. Although weirdly enough, in the midst of his life falling apart, he still somehow managed to beat a returning Brock Lesnar in one of the most brutal matches I've ever seen at Extreme Rules in Brock Lesnar's first match back, which was really bizarre because he went through so many losses that year because he was so tore up about the loss against The Rock that he couldn't concentrate on the matches. All he wanted to do was face The Rock again because he knew he could beat The Rock. Very similar to how Shawn Michaels thought he could beat The Undertaker. So that's why he wanted another match against The Undertaker. But like I said, in the midst of all that, he somehow still managed to beat Brock Lesnar in a very brutal match, which I thought was bizarre. Yeah, I think in the midst of all that, the way that John Cena's life was falling apart, surely it would have made sense for Brock Lesnar to have beaten John Cena. But anyway, we won't get into that. Yeah, so I feel like, stories are not told as well as they once were. I don't think stories are told badly these days, but they're just not built up the same. The video packages are just not the same. The music they use for the video packages are just not that they do these days. The few and far between ones that they do are just not as good. Go back, right? Go back, from like the early 2000s until sort of just before the PG era, and look at a lot of different packages from that, whether it be Edge's and Undertaker's rivalry, whether it be The Rock and Austin's rivalry or whatever. Go back and watch some of them packages and listen to the music in them packages because it's amazing. And then listen to the music you get in the packages these days. It's just not the same. The packages you get these days are all fucking pop and fucking R&B and rap, and it's just not as good. Back then, it was the packages were so much better, and the music was so much better that they used. And it might just be a case of, well, the music that was out back then is better than what the music is these days, and I would say that is true to an extent. You know, I much prefer older music to newer music. I think a lot of newer music is just noise, and that might be me showing my age, but I do truly believe that. But anyway, I'm not going to get into music. But yeah, stories are just not as told as well as they once were. I think you get your odd story where it's really like the Drew McIntyre CM Punk story. That was an amazing story. People say it was about a bracelet. It wasn't about a bracelet. That bracelet sort of became part of the story, but it wasn't what the story was. The story was the disdain that the two guys had for each other. Not about a bracelet. The bracelet was part of it, but not the full story. The full story and the crux of it was as simple as they couldn't stand each other and they wanted to beat the shit out of each other and prove who was better. That's what it was. And it was an amazing story, and there was some amazing matches that came with said story. Unfortunately, the Seth Rollins and CM Punk story hasn't really been told yet because whenever they do try and tell that story, yeah, they've had a match, but only once on one single match against each other, I believe. And they still haven't had their WrestleMania match yet because whenever they look like they're going to build towards it, CM Punk's either injured or Seth Rollins is injured. It's just not fallen. So it is a shame the way that, especially WrestleMania rivalries, the way that they are built. And me and my co-host did talk, and we talked about it the other day on the stream before we watched Raw, and we said about the build to this year's WrestleMania hasn't been the best. As much as we're excited for WrestleMania, we don't feel the hype that we once did feel in the past about WrestleMania. Although we still are excited for it because we're wrestling fans, WWE fans. Of course, we're still going to be excited for it. It just doesn't feel the same. And it is to do with the build. It is to do with the stories. Although the stories are not bad, they're just not built to make. They're just not built the same to make you really, really care about them. You know what I mean? So it's a difficult one, but um, WrestleMania this year, I have no doubt in my mind that it will be a good WrestleMania. The card is good, but in terms of the stories, which is what gets people invested in the matches, they've not been great, and I wish there was more stipulation matches. Like most of the matches are just singles matches. You've got an unsanctioned match, and you've got some fatal four ways and triple threats and stuff, and a ladder match. But there isn't really any stipulation to the big matches. So there's no stipulation to the Randy Orton Cody match, which I think they should be. I think that should be an anything goes match. I think that's how that match should go, especially with how brutal Randy Orton has been towards Cody. I think having a disqualification match is just not what that match needs. The CM Punk Roman Reigns match, I think that could be a Bloodline Rules match. That would be such a big way to have that match. But Roman wants to prove that he can do it on his own, so it wouldn't really make sense to have a Bloodline Rules match. You've got the Becky Lynch AJ Lee match. They've already faced off. They faced off once in a tag team match where obviously Becky and Seth faced Punk and AJ Lee, and then they've already faced each other at Elimination Chamber in a singles match. Why are we having another singles match? WrestleMania is the biggest PLE of the year in terms of, well, in wrestling just in general, and yet we're just getting another normal one-on-one match. To me, that makes no sense. And if I'm not wrong in saying, I don't even think the match was referenced on the final Raw before Mania, although I was falling asleep through it, so I might have missed that. But yeah, I just think that the build this year could have been better, and the the match stipulations could have been better as well. I think there's too many normal matches for a WrestleMania card. But hey ho. Um, I think if I was to talk about who's main event in WrestleMania this year, you've got Randy and Cody, you've got Punk and Roman, who are in the night two main events of the main event of main events. And do they all deserve to be there? Absolutely. I think it's Randy Orton's time. I think, he's getting towards the sort of tail end of his career. He needs another championship run now if he's going to level with not John Cena, if he's going to level with Ric Flair. I don't think he'll get 17 like John Cena has. I don't see it. I think he'll potentially level with Flair, but he needs to have a championship run, his 15th championship run, and it needs to happen this year. So I think he will win at WrestleMania. That's what I do truly believe. He absolutely deserves to be in that main event spot. He's still one of the biggest stars that WWE has. He's still one of the best wrestlers in the company, even though he's one of the oldest there now. So he absolutely deserves to be there. Cody Rhodes, I mean, he's QB1, isn't he? He's like the John Cena of this era. Whether people like it or not, he is going to keep getting pushed. He is going to be around because just like John Cena was, he kept getting pushed and people booed, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that John Cena kept getting pushed and got multiple championship runs. It didn't change that fact, and it won't change the fact with Cody. No matter how much people boo and get fed up of it, it just won't change anything because it didn't with John Cena. So people might as well just get used to it. Whether they like it or not, he is the new face of the company, and he's QB1. He is the man. He is the man to take the company into the future. Whether people like to admit it or not, he's a big draw, and he's still mostly beloved by the crowd. I mean, they still sing his song like mad. In terms of the other main event, night two main event, the main event, and main events, CM Punk and Roman Reigns. I mean, Roman Reigns has had loads of main events. Does he deserve to be in another one? No, I don't think he does. Yeah, he's a big star, but that doesn't just give you an automatic fucking, you know, it doesn't give you an automatic entrance into the main event. I completely understand why Roman doesn't wrestle very often, and I completely understand why he's part time, and I get it. His cancer is, although in remission, it's still there. So, it takes its toll. So I understand why he can't wrestle too much. But at the same time, yeah, okay, he can't wrestle too much, but he shouldn't be rewarded then. Reward the people that are there all the time. Reward the people that actually work their ass off 365 days a year. Now, I know he can't do that, and I get it, but that doesn't mean just because he's got an illness and he struggles, doesn't mean that he gets an automatic admission into the main event. It shouldn't work like that. So no, out of the four superstars that are in the main events of WrestleMania this year, he's the only one that doesn't deserve to be there. And then you got CM Punk, who I'm a big fan of, but I'm gonna address this as neutral as I can. Does CM Punk deserve to be in the main event? Absolutely, he does. People say he wouldn't be there without Roman. He absolutely would. He has been the biggest star that WWE has had over the last year. Since he won that World Heavyweight Championship, he has ran with it and absolutely took it to the next level. He has had an amazing title run with lots of different matches. He's been a fighting champion, and he has been one of the hardest workers in WWE this for the last year. So absolutely he deserves that main event. And whether Roman was in it with him or not, he was always going to main event. He was always going to. So yeah, I mean, out of the four, Roman's the only one that doesn't deserve to be there, and that's only because, and I know he can't help it, but that's only because he's barely there. And the people who should be first choice for main events of WrestleMania, the people that actually work their ass off and are there all the time. Like I said, I know he can't help it, but it doesn't mean that he should just be rewarded when he's hardly there. My co-host will hopefully be back shortly. He's just had to take a quick break. But yeah, I'm not going to make this an especially long stream. I mean, we've been going for just over an hour. Probably maybe do at most another hour. I don't want to push myself too much because it's going to be a very busy next few days. Because tomorrow is going to be a long stream with the WrestleMania 17 watch along. Then you've got Friday Night SmackDown, which again will be another long stream, and of course then at the weekend more long streams. So it's going to take a lot out of me. Plus then you've got Raw after Mania. So I want to try and make this stream not that long because I know I've got some long streams coming up. Um, in terms of WrestleMania moments, now look, I have many favorite moments. And one of them moments, and this might come as a shock, but one of them moments was the Firefly Funhouse match. And the main reason being was because I was a big fan of Bray. Ever since he debuted on the main roster, because I don't really watch NXT, I was just in love with his character. I thought his character was absolutely mesmerizing. I thought it was great, and I thought he was a creative genius. And he was a creative genius. And the Firefly Funhouse match, as much as it wasn't really a match, it was still the way it was created was just genius, and you just know that Bray was the one that really sort of constructed that match. And it was although it was in COVID, it was one of my favorite moments because obviously big fan of Bray, big fan of Cena. It had some good moments in there, some funny moments, and it was good to see. Um, Obviously, you've got some legendary moments. Whenever they play a WrestleMania package, it's still included to this day, where Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre the Giant. Nobody had ever done that before, although actually they had. But it was treated as like the first time that's ever happened to Andre the Giant. It was a big moment. It's still played in packages to this day. Um, big moment. As much as I don't really want to mention Hulk Hogan too much, you can't really not do when you're talking about WrestleMania moments. The next WrestleMania moment, of course, is a big one as well. It's another moment that includes Hulk Hogan, but it's one of the biggest WrestleMania moments of all time, one of the biggest WrestleMania matches of all time. And of course, I'm talking about Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. The Rock went in as the face, Hulk Hogan went in as the heel, but Hulk Hogan was absolutely cheered massively during that match, and so was The Rock. Like the crowd couldn't choose who they wanted to cheer for, and ultimately that turned Hogan back to a face. Um, you know, and it was a great match, and Hulk Hogan put The Rock over. It was the right decision. If he'd beaten The Rock, it wouldn't have done him any favors, and I think he knew that. So that's another big moment. You talk about greatest WrestleMania matches. You can't talk about greatest WrestleMania matches and not mention the two matches that Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had back to back. The WrestleMania 25 match, which I think is the better of the two, and then you had the Streak versus Career match at WrestleMania 26. I mean, the matches were great, but the story itself, leading up to their first match and then leading up to their second match, was a great story. And they're two of my favorite matches of all time when it comes to WrestleMania. I could watch them over and over again. I mean, two of the greatest going at it. I mean, how can they not be good matches? Um, um, Other big WrestleMania moments, of course, the heist of the century, WrestleMania 31, Seth Rollins, um, you know, cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase. I believe that was the WrestleMania that my co-host went to. Um, big moment. Nobody had cashed in their Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania before, and Seth Rollins was the first one to do it. And what an amazing moment it was. Although I didn't think it at the time, because obviously I didn't like Seth Rollins. He was a heel. He'd split the Shield with who I was a big fan of. So obviously really didn't like him at the time, but you can't deny it was a big moment. Um, Other big WrestleMania moments and matches. I'm trying to think. of course, um, the another a moment including Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair match, where if Ric Flair lost, he would have to retire. He lost, didn't end up retiring, but what a moment it was. Ric Flair in the ring in absolute tears, heartbroken that his career's over. He was at the age where really he should have retired, but in the end, he ended up completely fucking disrespecting that moment and, fucking that moment up for himself because he ended up wrestling elsewhere. He never wrestled in WWE again, but he ended up wrestling elsewhere, TNA to be exact. But yeah, good match. Emotional moment when Shawn Michaels did the legendary moment where he said, "I'm sorry, I love you," and then switching music to Ric Flair to end the match. He then obviously gave him a hug after the match while Ric Flair was still down and kissed him on the head. And then Ric Flair was left to have his moment where he was just in absolute tears, heartbroken. And then he got another a legendary moment on the Monday Night Raw after Mania where he got his retirement ceremony. A great ceremony. If you've never watched it before, go and watch it. Very emotional, and like I said, a very good ceremony. Other WrestleMania moments. I mean, there's so many you could talk about. Obviously, the very first match that the Undertaker had in his, that started his streak. We just confirmed who that was against. Okay, so his streak began with at WrestleMania 7 in 1991, defeating Jimmy Snuka, and then obviously he won many more matches. Um, of course, then you've got we talk about the start of the streak. Another big moment, another shocking, well, and one of probably the most shocking WrestleMania moment of all time was when that streak ended. Brock Lesnar being the one to end the streak. I still disagree with that result to this day. That decision, I don't think it should have happened. Brock didn't need it. But it is what it is, and it's done with, and there's nothing we can do to change it. But a very, very shocking moment indeed. So yeah, that would be the end of the streak. Another big moment, of course, was when Undertaker left his coat, his hat, and his gloves in the ring, seemingly ending his career after the Roman Reigns match. What was his second loss at WrestleMania? And the Undertaker has since said that he really was planning on hanging it up, and he really was planning on hanging it up. He didn't have any, that's why he did that. He didn't, he wanted to go off into the sunset, and that was it. He was really going to hang it up because he just wasn't happy with that match. But then, sorry, he sort of changed his mind and said, "Look, I'm not happy with the match, the way the match went. I should really end my career, but I think I need to end it on a better match than that." So he came back and he faced John Cena in a squash match, basically squashing John Cena, which I again think is such a stupid decision. A match that a lot of us have been waiting for WrestleMania for all them years. We finally get it. We finally get the moment where John Cena calls The Undertaker out. We think, right, we're going to get this amazing match at WrestleMania now. It's going to be a great 20-minute long match. And he ends up squashing John Cena, making John Cena look like a fucking jobber. I just didn't understand the decision at all. But yeah, of course, then the legendary moment where the Undertaker had his very final match in a boneyard match against AJ Styles during COVID. What a match that was! It was more of a fight than a match, and obviously the Undertaker won and rode his motorcycle off into the sunset, and he hasn't wrestled since. So it's been there's been some legendary moments for the Undertaker at at WrestleMania, but not just him. I mean, more moments as well. I mean, of course, the legendary entrance of John Cena at WrestleMania 25, where we had all them scene. Um, where he lost my train of thought there. Um, yeah. Um, um, yeah. So, Boneyard match was great, and then there's been some other legendary matches. Um, you know, it's WrestleMania is full of legendary matches. It's hard to choose which ones to talk about legendary moments, and you know, there is some moments that maybe are a bit taboo to talk about. Maybe you shouldn't talk about them, but I always pride myself on on my channel that anything really goes within reason, of course. And you can't talk about legendary moments and epic moments of WrestleMania and not talk about the ending of WrestleMania 20. I mean, it's as controversial as it is to talk about it because obviously of what happened with Benoit. It's it's still a legendary moment that people really enjoy still watching. It's hard to sort of watch it with the same warmth in your heart as you would have watched it originally because of obviously what happened. But it's still a moment that is legendary nonetheless. Of course, it's not a moment that's ever going to be celebrated again or ever seen again on WWE television. But it's still a moment that deserves to be mentioned when you're
Well,
talking about legendary moments at WrestleMania. At WrestleMania, go on. Sorry.
here's my point on that, and sorry for my absence, ladies and gents. I just needed to pop over to the bathroom. But talking about that moment, and look, if you want to take a positive from that moment, then rather than focus on what makes it controversial, focus on Eddie Guerrero, as that was probably the pinnacle of his career. And
Yeah.
it's just a shame that literally about a year later he passed away.
Yeah.
So you know, yeah, everyone goes on about obviously the controversy of the other guy involved, and rightly so. But don't forget that there were other wrestlers involved in that moment as well. Don't take that moment away from them.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I agree.
And I'm not here to discuss that man's legacy. I think to quote Steve Austin, it speaks for itself. What he did in the ring, and sadly what he did out of the ring, it speaks for itself. That we don't need to kind of make any justifications or anything like that here.
No. Um. But yeah. While you were away, I was just talking about some of my favorite WrestleMania moments. One of the moments I mentioned, and I don't know if you want to mention anything about it, but one of the moments I mentioned, one of my favorite moments or matches, and it's one that people might not choose, but I chose because I'm a big fan of both the guys that were in the match, but especially one of them, the Firefly Funhouse match.
Oh yeah.
Um, Big fan of Bray. I'm not going to go through everything again because I've already said it on stream, but big fan of Bray. Always was since he debuted, and I just thought it was a creatively genius match, and you just knew that Bray had constructed that match. Although it wasn't a match in its, in the general term, because there wasn't actually a match. It was just different moments that ended
Well,
with
it is.
the
It
the
is.
fiend, the
It,
fiend beating John Cena. But it was an amazing moment nonetheless, and one that I won't ever forget. But go on.
yeah, it was recorded as a win for Bray Wyatt though,
Mm,
so it was a match for all intents and purposes. But I mean, look, I mean, with Bray Wyatt, it was a case of what could have been. I'm sure he would have had more WrestleMania moments, but sadly, unfortunately, fate had other plans. So that was incredibly sad. But a lot of people argue that Bray Wyatt should have won his match against John Cena at WrestleMania 30. But I think given what was to happen later in the card with obviously The Undertaker and then obviously Daniel Bryan having his moment, maybe WWE creative felt there wasn't room on the card for another big moment. But and you mentioned about Cena and The Undertaker. I mean, again, yeah, that was a weird one. I don't understand why he was brought back for a squash match against John Cena of all people. It obviously did no harm to John Cena's career, of course, but I
No,
mean,
I mean it's not even about that though. It's about the fact that it's a match that a lot of us have been clamoring for years. Like even, like before the streak was ended, like we wanted a John Cena Undertaker match, two of the biggest names in wrestling. We wanted them to face each other at WrestleMania with the Undertaker streak on the line. When the streak ended, we still wanted the match, and then we finally got it, and it wasn't what any of us wanted. It wasn't what any of us anticipated. It was basically a squash match. Of course, it did no damage to John Cena. John Cena had already cemented his legacy at that point, was already a fully fledged legend, one of the greatest of all time. But it still felt very weird for them to just do that. Like, very, very weird.
yeah, and look, I I can't explain it to be honest. But speaking of the streak, I have said this to you time and again, and it is something I will say until the day I die. Ending the streak was the worst thing they did.
Yeah, I said that while you were away. I said that.
It was, it's what it's what set the Undertaker apart from everybody else. It was the one thing that put him above The Rock, that put him above Austin, that put him above Triple H, Shawn Michaels, John Cena, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Roman Reigns,
Yeah.
All these legendary figures that have come through WrestleMania. But they took it away from him. Again, no damage to his career or legacy, but he should have been remained undefeated.
Yep. No, I agree. And look, it's just something that shouldn't have happened. But you know, I I think it would be stupid to talk about big WrestleMania moments and not talk about probably the biggest recent moment in WrestleMania history. Of course, that being Cody Rhodes ending the historic reign of Roman Reigns and finally finishing his story. What a WrestleMania that was in general. You had The Rock wrestling on night one in the main event in that tag team match. He then had a Bloodline Rules match with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes, where you had, like, as some people said it, the Avengers of WWE, come to help Cody with, John Cena, Seth Rollins, and then, of course, supposed to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, but they couldn't come to agreement on money, so it ended up being The Undertaker, which was just as good of a moment as it would have been if it had been Stone Cold. Because it's The Undertaker. What a moment, the match itself, what a moment, the result itself, what a moment, and the return of all them legends. Well, I say all them legends, John Cena and John Cena and the Undertaker, of course. Obviously, Seth Rollins got involved as well, and obviously the return of The Rock in ring action as well. Um, you know, Talking about big WrestleMania moments, you can't not mention the biggest, most recent WrestleMania moment, that being Cody finishing his story. And, it was a great moment to see, and Cody absolutely deserved that moment, and he deserved to finish his story. He absolutely deserved and deserves the multiple title reigns he's had since. And, he's fully cemented himself as the new face of WWE. But yeah, anything you want to say about that moment?
No, I mean, it's as you said, one of the great recent moments in WWE's history. It was a great storyline that played out over a couple of WrestleManias. It involved, a whole cast of characters from both WWE's past, present, and future. And yeah, it was a good moment. And then watching all the good guys come out to celebrate with him, it was a memorable moment for 40 years of WrestleMania. And, yeah, I would say that's probably one of the best WrestleManias of all time. It's up there, certainly in my top five.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you can't talk about big WrestleMania moments and not talk about that. Uh, I'm trying to think. What are some of the moments to talk about here? I think there's so many moments you could choose from. Really, when it comes to WrestleMania, like so many. Um, I mean, the another moment that's a lot of people say should have ended differently, and it was it should never have gone the way it did, and that being in the Triple H Booker T match, where a lot of people think that Booker T should have won and Triple H should have put Booker T over, but obviously Triple H never did. And a lot of people disagree with that result, and I have to disagree with it as well. I think Booker T should have won, but it is what it is, and you can't change the past. But it was a decent match, but Triple H wasn't really known for putting many people over, especially at WrestleMania. So can't be too surprised that he didn't put Booker T over. But I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
No, I agree. I think Booker T should have been put over, but as was the case with a lot of the sort of WCW OGs, they were never really truly given a standout WWE moment. I mean, interestingly, if you look at a lot of former WCW wrestlers who jumped over to WWE after the takeover, none of them won the top belt, as far as I'm aware. The only person that comes to mind who did, and by top belt I mean the lineal WWE/WWF.
Yeah,
The only person I can think of who did, and that was only basically for a couple of hours, was Rey Mysterio.
yeah,
And then obviously he dropped the belt to John Cena a couple of hours later on Raw. Booker T never won it. Goldberg never won it.
no.
I mean, Chris Benoit came before the invasion angle. I mean, those were the only real big WWE, WCW people that came over. But
Well, when Sting had his run, he never won it.
well, well, that's a different category altogether, isn't it? The botched sort of run as it was. Who else was there? I'm trying to think of big WCW stars who came over. I mean, DDP, obviously, but it's not as though he was going to get given the title, was he? He was already pretty old by then.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, that's just how it was. They were never going to put the WCW title back. I mean, they were never going to put the WWE's title on a WCW OG. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. They were never going to do that. It's a shame, but they never were going to do that. Um, of other moments. I've named a fair few moments now, but there's so many you could talk about. So many matches you could talk about. Uh, well, another memorable match for me was, I think it was at WrestleMania 20 as well as the other moment we talked about earlier on. I'm pretty sure it was when um, Undertaker faced Kane, and Undertaker made his return. You know,
As
am
a
I right?
dead man.
Yeah, as a dead man. Yeah, obviously he was the American Badass before that, and he returned as the dead man. And obviously there was teases all the way from the Rumble until WrestleMania, or until up until just before WrestleMania, that the Undertaker was going to make a return. Of course, that infamous Royal Rumble moment where Kane is in the ring, and I think it's number 15 counts down, and the buzzer goes off, and then the legendary Undertaker gong, goes off. Obviously he doesn't come out, but it distracts Kane, and Kane gets eliminated. He then takes out Spike Dudley, thinking Spike Dudley had done it. Um, but yeah, that match, it was a good match, but the moment of the Undertaker music hitting and him walking slowly onto the stage, and Kane just sort of shaking his head, saying, "No, no, this can't be real," was just an amazing moment. The match itself wasn't massively memorable, although good, wasn't massively memorable. But the moment of watching Undertaker walk out and Kane just like, "No, no, no," as if he's like scared shitless. Um,
But
you know,
you're forgetting as well. It was after a very, very, very long time. It was the return of Paul Bearer.
yeah, yeah. My Undertaker. Sorry.
God, that was awful.
It was. It was. I'm not good at impressions.
But yeah, no, the WrestleMania entrance is always a special thing about WrestleMania.
Absolutely.
Undertaker, obviously, many memorable ones. Shawn Michaels had a fair few ones. We've said John Cena's entrance. I particularly like Sting's entrance. Well, of course, his one and only WrestleMania, but his entrance was pretty good. Um, who else had some?
Well, one of your favourite entrances of all time at WrestleMania, John Cena's.
Yeah, I've already said that.
Oh, did you? Sorry, I didn't hear you say that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Um, who else had some memorable
I
entrances?
mean, Rusev had a memorable one, didn't he? Coming in on the tank.
Yes, yes, there was Rusev's.
Um,
Um, I'm sure there have been plenty of memorable ones. I just can't think of them right now.
yeah, there has been plenty of memorable ones. Of course, Shawn Michaels has had a few memorable ones.
Yeah,
His WrestleMania 25 entrance when he was facing the Undertaker, coming down like he was coming down from the heavens, like he was Jesus or like he was God. Um, that was a good entrance. I believe, didn't he make a entrance at WrestleMania on a zip line?
yeah, he did. He did.
Another memorable entrance. There's been some epic entrances at WrestleMania. Um, yes, yes, he is. Um, but in what way?
Oh, you don't want to know.
Sorry, just a bit of a private message going on there between me and my co-host. Anyway, yeah, I mean, you could sit here all day and talk about the WrestleMania entrances and the moments and stuff like that. And we've talked about WrestleMania this year. We talked about it on, just before Raw on Monday. We talked about it. We talked about, how we felt about the build, and that it just hasn't been the best this year. Although we are still looking forward to it, we're just not as hyped as we would be usually. Um, but I just want to switch. I will be ending the stream relatively shortly because I don't want to make it too long because I've got some long streams coming up for the rest of the week. So I don't want to push it too much, but I just wanted to switch to like the final subject of the stream, which we'll talk about for about 10-15 minutes. And I wanted to switch it up and talk about the Hall of Fame. Obviously, the Hall of Fame is a an event that happens every year around WrestleMania. It's to me not as good as it once was. I always used to look forward to the Hall of Fame ceremony. I still do in some ways, depending on who's been inducted, but it just doesn't feel as special as it once did. Um, but you know, on one hand, I want to take the WWE Hall of Fame seriously, but on the other hand, with some of the people that are in it and that have remained in it, it's almost like a joke these days. Um, but you know, I thought we could talk about the Hall of Fame in general. We could talk about the inductees for this year, at least the big inductees like AJ Lee, not AJ Lee, AJ Styles and Stephanie McMahon. Um, it in terms of the Hall of Fame in general, it's just like I said, it's not as good as it once was. The last memorable moment of the Hall of Fame was when Bret Hart got tackled by a fan. Um, that was the sorry, that was a joke. Um, but yeah, that was like I don't know. It just isn't as memorable as it used to be. The Hall of Fame ceremony. I don't like how they do it in the ring now. My co-host has said the same thing. Like I just don't like how they do it in the ring. I think it's very informal. I think that it was better on a stage. Um,
Yeah,
but
I just hate the way it just honestly it just cheapens the event. It just feels really tacky. It feels like it's something that's just stuck on the end of a SmackDown as opposed to given its own sort of time slot, its own attention, its own platform. It doesn't feel like a prestigious event anymore, honestly. And some of the cop outs that they're doing, like for example, putting Sid in the legacy wing, so he's not even gonna get. He's not even gonna get. He's not gonna have a proper induction. Like somebody comes, gives a speech about him, and then someone to receive the award. It's just going to be a video package, which I just think is really, really sad.
yeah, I think he deserves more than that.
I mean, I don't know why they chose to do that. His family have been very diplomatic about it, but nevertheless, I don't know why they made that choice. Whether it was a case of they just wanted to give attention to the others, fair enough. Um, but yeah, I think of this year's inductees, the one that obviously I think is the most deserving is probably AJ Styles,
Yeah,
which came as a bit of a surprise. They happened so soon, and obviously the whole storyline kind of took me by surprise. His retirement ended so soon, but you know he wasn't going to get if he wasn't going to get a retirement run like John Cena did, then I guess this is probably the next best thing. So he gets an induction, justifiably so. One of the, not my personal favorite in terms of the all-time greats, but he's up there in terms of one of the great technicians. Had a great career in both WWE, TNA, briefly in WCW, and in Japan, of course. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the other inductees. You need to remind me.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, someone who I am personally not a big fan of, but you know, it looks as though TKO wants to honor, you know, the previous ownership or the previous leadership, as it were. They've done Triple H, they've done Stephanie McMahon. You
Who's
know,
next?
I
Vince.
hope that I hope they're not going to do the father, but look,
Yeah. There'll probably be
you know,
Shane next,
possibly, and it
and
is
then
what it
Linda.
is. Yeah, it is what it is. Dennis Rodman in the celebrity wing. I know this has divided a lot of opinion. I'm personally not a fan of Dennis Rodman. But yeah, he had a few celebrity tag matches with Hulk Hogan, Rodzilla, as he was called. Other than that, I just don't really like the guy. He's
Hmm.
got some questionable political views and cites, North Korean dictators as his best friends. So not somebody I would put in the Hall of Fame. Um, Tag teams. Who have they put in as a tag team?
It's Demolition in it.
Demolition. Yep, deservedly in there. I don't know an awful lot about them, so I'm not going to comment. But I know that they were a legendary tag team. Anyone else we've missed out?
Let me have a
Oh,
quick look.
the iconic moment, isn't it? The Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan.
Brother.
I mean,
Uh,
the thing that bothers me about this, okay, yes, it is an iconic moment, but and going back to last year's when they put in the Bret Hart Steve Austin match,
yeah.
are they really getting that desperate for inductees that they have to now start going on about matches?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
There are still plenty of people out there they could induct, past, present, whatever. I can't believe that it's got to a point in time where they now have to start inducting matches.
I know.
And, look, me and you have made no secret of the fact that we detest Hulk Hogan. Are we just going to keep hearing his name every year, every time WrestleMania comes around? Is he
Mm.
going to be inducted in one way or another every year?
Yeah.
What's it going to be next year? Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Or the year after that, Mr. America.
I
Or the
mean,
year after that, Hulk Hogan versus The Rock.
well, yeah. Well, I was going to say you do know at some point they are going to induct that match, and that's fair because it is a great match.
It is, but then it's like, where do you kind of draw the line now? You
I
know?
think. I think personally, each superstar should get at the most two of their matches inducted. That's it. I think at most, because you could otherwise you could fucking have like 25 John Cena matches, and then you could have another superstar that's only got two. It's like no,
But
two at
then,
most.
okay, but then with Hulk Hogan, okay, my opinion of him as a human being aside, if you're going to induct matches, multiple matches, how can you ignore, as you rightly said, that his match against The Rock, but you can't ignore his match against Ultimate Warrior, and obviously the first main event of the first WrestleMania main event.
Yeah.
So if we're going down that route where matches are now eligible for the Hall of Fame, then Hulk Hogan could easily get inducted in like 10 times.
Well, yeah.
And this is what makes the Hall of Fame a little bit ridiculous. It was meant to recognize individuals or groups, but
Yeah.
ultimately recognize people, not like the match. You recognize the individual because they participated in such a match. I mean, I just find it ridiculous. Don't you?
Me too. Yeah, me too. Uh, so I'm just looking at the list of inductees. So we did miss one, Bad News Brown.
Again, I don't know an awful lot about the guy, so I can't comment. I
No, me neither.
think he was in a WrestleMania main event. Did he also wrestle under the name Zeus? I can't remember.
Don't know.
You're gonna have to look that one up. Again, I don't know an awful lot about him, so. But I've got to say, apart from AJ Styles, honestly, I
Um,
think it's a very weak Hall of Fame this year. Stephanie McMahon, again, not a massive fan. She only got there where she is because of who she is. Sid, legendary figure. I am a fan of Sid, but the guy's not there to accept the induction.
he was never known as Zeus. It's not the same person.
Okay.
Um, he was known as Bad News Brown, Bad News Alan, Alan Coach, Bad News, but never
Yeah,
Zeus.
can't really,
Um,
can't really say I.
so yeah, I mean, look, it is quite a weak Hall of Fame, but it seems to be a regular occurrence now where you've got the one big inductee and the rest is weak. I mean, look at When Paul Heyman was inducted, there wasn't really any other memorable inductees that year, and he had them. He had the floor for the most of the time. It
I mean,
seems to be.
You had Muhammad Ali inducted, posthumously, but again, it didn't really have the appeal because Muhammad Ali wasn't there to. Of course, Muhammad Ali had been dead, for a few years now.
Yeah.
But on a side point, how could you have Muhammad Ali turn up to a Hall of Fame ceremony and not be the main event?
Well, that's it. But
In what universe is Muhammad Ali not the star attraction? But I don't want to digress too much, but then every time the Hall of Fame comes up, it also brings up the debate of people who are in there that really shouldn't be in there, or people that should be. And I think there are names I don't want to mention over and over again. But a certain president of the United States is in there who I don't think should be. We've made no secret of the fact that we don't like Hulk Hogan, but unfortunately, he has to be in there.
yeah.
Mike Tyson, convicted rapist. Yes, everyone who does the time for the crime, they're entitled to rehabilitate them. Some will agree that he has rehabilitated himself, and he's entitled to get on with his life.
Yeah.
I have no issues with that. As someone who is pursuing the legal career, I am a believer in the justice system. I am a believer in people, if they do the time, they are entitled to another chance in life.
Absolutely.
That doesn't go as far as celebrating them as some kind of hero or icon, because he really isn't. And we can go into, we can debate about whether or not he really was guilty or the whatever. The fact remains is he was convicted of rape and he served a jail sentence for it.
Yeah.
And this is the man that's in the WWE Hall of Fame. Let's not forget that Donald Trump, whatever criticisms we have of him, also is a convicted criminal.
True.
And he's in the Hall of Fame. Peter Maivia, The Rock's grandfather, blinded a man.
Yeah.
Razor Ramon, the late Scott Hall, okay, in self-defense, but he shot dead a man.
Yeah.
So, as I said at the start of the evening, the WWE Hall of Fame is flawed in the sense that not just about the people that are in it, but that who is actually making the choice to induct people. Because it's not the fans, it's not any respected wrestling journalist.
Yeah.
Because with all due respect, I'm going to make an edgy opinion here. I don't think Stephanie McMahon has done anything worthwhile to be in a Hall of Fame. Yes, she made some great decisions as a businesswoman, but at the end of the day, she's only in that position because of who she was or is. And it's not as though she was some kind of a trailblazer. And I
No.
complete, and this is not, like me taking the floor to like stick the knife into Stephanie McMahon, but I really can't stand her podcast as well. It's just some sort of fucking vanity project. Oh, look at me, I'm Stephanie McMahon. Honestly, that McMahon family just has to disappear from wrestling. Wrestling will be a better place. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent again, but that entire family just has to disappear from the wrestling industry.
I agree, but unfortunately, I don't think that's
And
ever going to
and I
happen.
and I and I and I hate to say it, Triple H included, they all just need to bugger off now. They've got their money, they've got their millions or billions or whatever. They should just get lost.
It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, it's not going to
Not
happen.
yet, not yet. Give it some time. Give it some time. Maybe them getting their inductions one by one is a way of kind of them saying goodbye.
Maybe.
Um,
Maybe.
but that's my opinion. I am a bit like how we said about Chris Benoit and Hulk Hogan. Their records will speak for themselves in terms of the McMahons. When you discuss the history of wrestling in North America, you can't have that discussion without mentioning Vince McMahon Senior and Vince McMahon Junior,
Yeah.
and then the rest of the McMahon family. But doesn't mean we have to like him as an individual.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, there was a famous quote Winston Churchill said, ironically, somebody who I'm also not a fan of, but I acknowledge that a lot of people do revere him as a hero. He famously said, respect the house, if not the man. You know, you don't have to be you don't have to necessarily be a fan of the man. You can respect their achievements, and as we said, the achievements speak for themselves. I don't have to go as far as celebrating him.
No.
And this is genuinely what I feel about Stephanie McMahon. Seeing her in the Hall of Fame, I don't want to say it makes me sick, but yeah, it disgusts me. I don't think she's done anything worthwhile. If anything, she used her position to basically isolate China. And have her fired from WWE. There are several allegations leveled against Stephanie McMahon about the treatment of female athletes in WWE. I'm not going to go in depth into that. Obviously, I don't want to put either of us on the chopping block for legal action. But yeah, I'm no fan of the McMahon Helmsley era. Yeah, Triple H, I acknowledge. Would he be in the top 10 of all time? What do you think? I'd say
Top.
probably.
Possibly.
But, there's no doubt that he benefited.
I mean, of course. I mean, he was, he was always going to benefit, dating the boss's daughter, but they legitimately did fall in love, and it happens, and
No, that's fine. I have no
it's
qualms about.
it's one of those things that just happens. Yeah, okay, the whole China thing was, was not the best, but let's be brutally honest here. It was never going to work with the three of them being in the same business anymore. Not after everything that happened. And there's only one person out of them three that was ever going to go, and it was going to be China. It could have been done in a better way, but in the end, whether it happened the way it did or whether she just left on her own in the end, it was always going to happen. China did not after Triple H got with Stephanie, and after everything that happened, China did not have a future in that business at all. And it's unfortunate because she deserved to have a future in that business, but it just wasn't going to happen. The three of them were not going to coexist in the same business. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. In terms of Stephanie deserving to be in the Hall of Fame, as much as, obviously certain McMahons I'm not a big fan of, in terms of Stephanie, I think that she's, as an on-screen character, I think she's had some big moments. I think the whole authority storyline was one of the biggest storylines of the 2010s. With her and Triple H, I think her early moments in WWE, where she was involved in storylines with her dad, when her dad was, when her mum was frozen in that wheelchair and couldn't speak, or that rivalry, and then obviously the whole rivalry with Shane and her dad. She had a lot of on screen time, and she had a fair few moments. I think in terms of what she did for the business when she was in charge, I think she does deserve to be in there because ultimately, when she was in charge, I think I don't think she did a bad job. Does she deserve it more than other people? Maybe not, but I think she deserves to be in there for the moments that she did give. She's not somebody that's a trailblazer. She's not somebody that's revered as a legendary in-ring competitor or anything like that. But she never was going to be going to be that. Yeah, she's a former women's champion, but that's very forgettable. Like her, as far as her in-ring, um, you know, career, it's very forgettable because she barely really did anything. But in terms of the storylines that she was involved with and the moments that she gave during them storylines, and then obviously the Authority storyline, which turned out to be one of the biggest moments, biggest storylines of the 2010s, and ended up giving us one of the biggest moments in WrestleMania history, that being the whole Daniel Bryan storyline. For the moments I've mentioned alone, I think she deserves to be in there. Um, I completely
Okay,
get
well,
I completely get your viewpoint. Completely get your viewpoint, and I understand that it's in terms of the McMahon family, it's a very controversial subject these days, and it's like
look, eventually the McMahons will be gone, whether it's in the near future or whenever. They will be gone for various reasons, but I just honestly feel that they don't have a place in WWE anymore. Yes, if you want to put them in the Hall of Fame, fine. Their names will be there forever. But honestly, I don't think they are they. I don't think they should be at the helm of the future of this business. But it is what it is. But I mean, maybe here's something to close the conversation on, or the stream on. Let's discuss. Maybe we've done this before. People who we think should be in the Hall of Fame.
I mean,
And obviously within reason. So, for example, I'll go right off the bat and say, Owen Hart is off the table because we obviously are aware of why he is not going to be in the Hall of Fame anytime soon, and there's just no point in discussing that because I'm sure we both agree he should be in there, but it won't happen.
yeah, yeah.
But I'll start with one. Not a wrestler. Well, he has wrestled at
Pardon
some
me.
point, but Michael Cole. I
Yeah.
think should be in there. What about you then? What do you think? What do you...
Um, who's not in that should be in? I
I
mean,
mean,
I
yeah. Feel
think
free to. Yeah.
I think it goes without saying that this man should go in, and had he had a longer career, he probably would have, you know, gave us a lot more epic moments, and that's the one and only Bray Wyatt. I think he should be in there, mainly due to his creative genius, if nothing else.
I think he will.
Um,
I think he will be. He'll be in there at some point.
but yeah, that's
Obviously,
one
one
of
for the
mine.
family to kind of decide on.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll name another one. I mean, we could name people from outside of WWE if you want. Without a doubt, Chris Jericho. And rumors abound were that he was going to be in the Hall of Fame this year. Now, obviously, his contract signing with AEW has changed that completely.
yeah,
Whether or not it prevents him from a Hall of Fame induction, maybe next year or the year after, for a brief return, I don't know, but definitely should be in there.
yeah. Um,
Something else? Yeah, go on.
my next one, talking about somebody that's not in WWE, Christian.
Yeah. Um,
I absolutely believe that he should be in there. I also believe that Edge and Christian as a tag team should be in there as well.
what do you think's more likely to happen first, him as an individual or the tag team?
I think him as an individual will go in first, and the tag team will go in after.
I mean, that's how it should be.
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
what will happen.
Another person who we've not seen for a while. I don't know if he's still under AEW contract. The Big Show, Paul White.
Yeah.
Absolutely, if not, should have been a while ago. Another one currently on AEW's books who I think should be in there and will be at some point, Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, yeah.
Who else?
Um,
Here's a weird one for you. Obviously now WWE, well, they have done for the last 25 years, own WCW's legacy, as it were.
yeah,
One of the big voices of the Monday Night Wars, Tony Schiavone. Love him or hate him. I mean, he did briefly work in the WWE for a year.
yeah.
can be a bit of a divisive figure in terms of his commentary style, but no doubt he is a legendary figure. But of course, as an AEW commentator, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
No. Of course, they haven't been inducted yet, but I think individually they both should go in, and as a tag team they should go in as well. The Hardy Boys.
Of course, of course. One of the great tag teams, not just of all time, also of the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let's name a few that probably people wouldn't think of necessarily right off the bat. I'm going to say Raven.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he was a great hardcore wrestler. He had a really great sort of depressive grunge style gimmick in WCW. Hardworking guy, was in the big three: WWE, ECW, WCW. Worthy of a Hall of Fame induction, I think. Um,
I've got one.
Go on.
I think when we've talked about this before, when we've talked about it in private, and we've talked about it um in on stream as well. I believe Jazz should be in there.
Yeah, Jazz. I was confusing her with someone else for a moment, but yeah, Jazz. Perhaps not as popular as the other sort of females of that era. I mean, here's one that I would put in who probably won't be in. I don't know. I don't think her relationship has improved with WWE, but
Yeah.
Gail Kim.
Gail Kim, yeah.
Another one who should definitely be in there, and who I believe is now on good terms with WWE again and has been for a while, Mickey James.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Uh,
Another one.
Layla.
We're sort of, yeah, Layla. We're on the train of female wrestlers at the moment. Another one that should be in there is Victoria.
Yes, lovely
Definitely.
name.
I also think,
I think
you know,
AJ Lee worthy of an induction at some point now.
oh yeah, she definitely will be in there. I also think, just her storyline with Tori Wilson and Tori Wilson's dad alone should put her in the Hall of Fame. Dawn Marie.
Uh,
I think she deserves to be in there.
People say Natalia every year.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we could name loads of current superstars that could be in the Hall of Fame and will be in the Hall of Fame at some point.
Oh, there's one big female name we haven't mentioned,
Go on.
but obviously for the reasons of her death, Miss Elizabeth.
Of course, of course.
But given that they have now inducted Lex Luger, who, you know, if it's to be believed that because of obviously his storied history with Miss Elizabeth was a stumbling block, then surely I would think Miss Elizabeth should be in there.
Yeah, I think she will be at some point. Um,
Even dare I say it, the wife of a certain wrestler who, we don't mention,
yeah,
who
yeah,
was a trailblazer in her own right, and
yeah,
many people, including Chris Jericho and Dean Malenko, have all been supportive of having her inducted. But unfortunately, to do it publicly, you can just imagine one or two a group of moronic fans who will probably start chanting the name of that, that individual's husband, and it will just cause a bit of an embarrassment.
yeah. Uh,
And also, people might question whether what purpose would it serve putting her in the Hall of Fame, because it just draws attention to the tragedy, as it were.
well, yeah, and it is a shame because really she should be in there.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it is unfortunately because of those incidences that she probably won't be in there as with China as an individual, as with Miss Elizabeth as an
Yeah.
individual. It's Sable is one that
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be getting the nod, despite the fact that her husband, is still wrestling with the company. And that is quite bizarre because, you know, as far as I'm aware, pretty much most of the people of the Attitude, or certainly the big names of the Attitude Era,
Mm.
are now in there,
Yeah.
except for her.
Um.
But then would you argue she kind of epitomized everything that was wrong with the Attitude Era, the whole being scantily clad all the time, the Playboy magazines and all that?
Yeah. Um. I.
Vader's not in there.
Yeah. Vader. Yeah.
Bam Bam Bigelow's not in there.
Yeah. So.
Personally, I would like Dwight the Clown in there, but the problem we have, so many people portrayed him who would actually be the ones to kind of receive the induction,
Yeah.
and B, one of those people who did portray him, I believe their family is in the midst of suing WWE, or at least their case got thrown out or something. So
Yeah.
it would be a little bit awkward doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one. It's a bit of a controversial one. Not anybody stupid who definitely will never be inducted, but one that I think mainly due to how much of a legendary booker he was. Um, and I'm being completely serious when I say this, because I know we make a lot of jokes about this man. But Kevin
Kevin
Sullivan,
Sullivan. No, I agree. He was a very respected individual. If you remember Rey Mysterio's Hall of Fame speech from a few years
yeah,
ago, both Conan and Rey Mysterio mentioned and thanked Kevin Sullivan. Um, we do make a lot of jokes about the guy for reasons we will not go into here.
yeah,
But he is one of those people who perhaps doesn't get the credit he deserves. In terms of a group, I think the LWO should get an induction.
yeah, yeah,
So that would make Eddie Guerrero a two-time inductee, because obviously he was the founder and original leader of the LWO. But who would be the others that kind of join him in that induction? Apart from Rey Mysterio,
well, yeah, well, exactly, yeah.
Conan maybe. Well,
What
Conan was
about
that.
I've got another one. What about Chavo Guerrero?
Yeah, indeed. Or Vicky Guerrero as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Excuse me.
she's yeah. Uh, Here's a name I'm going to throw a bit left. He's already in the Hall of Fame as part of the group, but individually, I think Arn Anderson would be great in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
But I think a stumbling block to that might be the person that he wants to induct him probably isn't welcome in WWE these days. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote a lengthy social media post taking a jab at WWE about something.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Um. Yeah.
But um,
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, we could spend an eternity talking about who should go into the Hall of Fame, but I think, you
okay,
know,
let's do a bit of an edgier one. Who should be removed from the Hall of Fame?
nobody.
Nobody.
I'm joking. I'm joking. Well, we know a few of the names that
Well,
we
we've
would
mentioned
personally
three
want
already.
removed from the Hall of Fame. Of course, a certain American president um, should be
Heavyweight
removed from the
boxer,
Hall of Fame. Absolutely.
Mike
Um,
Tyson.
Mike Tyson, Hulk Hogan. Um,
I think Jimmy Snuka should be removed. I
he's
think
already
if
been removed.
oh, has he?
Yeah.
Well, good.
About 2 years before he died, he was removed because that's when all the stuff was. He was finally being put to trial for everything that for the death that he caused.
Well, and
Um,
unfortunately, he evaded justice.
he did because he died before he could be brought to justice. But we will get into that. So yeah, so Jimmy Snooker's already out. Who else should be removed?
The fabulous Moolah. I think. I don't know if she already has been, but obviously, you might recall they renamed that tournament that was named after her because evidence came out that she had abused uh, a lot of younger wrestlers.
Let me see if she's still in.
JBL's one that I would remove. I'm not a fan of him.
Is he even in at the moment?
He is. He is a bully and a racist.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimate Warrior is another one I would remove. Again,
Yeah, she was inducted in 1995 and she's still in there. Fabulous Moolah.
I would remove her. I'd remove the Ultimate Warrior. I think he was an unpleasant human being. Held some very, very, very horrible views.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. Um,
Don't they still have that Connors Award or whatever they call it?
no, they haven't done that for a few years now.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to mention somebody who I think should be in there, and this is an extremely controversial one. Vince Russo.
Oof. Oh,
Love him or hate him, he was the architect of the Attitude Era.
and he's a former WCW champion. I mean,
And he was also the architect of WCW's downfall.
exactly. Uh,
So he
uh,
probably had his hand in like two of the biggest moments in wrestling history.
yeah. Yeah, that is a very controversial one. Um,
But somebody who I have a lot of time for. Again, love him or hate him, I still think. I mean, I won't make this about WCW. We can always talk about it another time. I remember saying this to Kevin Nash when I spoke to him in the airport once on the way back from WrestleMania 31. We were talking about that era. We were talking about stuff like the Finger Poke of Doom, ending Goldberg's streak.
mm.
And look, hindsight is 2020. We all look back on it now and we say, oh, they should have not ended the streak there and then or whatever. But people were under pressure. They made rash decisions that they probably didn't think through. I mean, to be honest, anything involving Hulk Hogan was always a bad decision.
I've got another one here, and I think I'll finish on this one. It's a bit of a controversial one because of certain people that played this character, but I think the character in general, even if nobody sort of accepts the award, I think the character in general should go in the Hall of Fame. And I
Doink.
mentioned this character earlier, Doink the Clown.
No, I already mentioned Doink.
Did you? I didn't hear you mention Doink. But I do think. I mean, obviously certain people that portrayed him are controversial, but I do still think the character in general, even if they just did a package of what the character did and didn't have anybody collect it or induct a single or
Legacy
single
Award.
yeah, a legacy award. So they don't induct a single person who played Doink, just the character itself. I think that'd be a way to do it. I think the reason they haven't done it yet is because of, the controversial, one person in particular that played Doink the Clown who's quite controversial. I think that's why they've not done it. But I think if they did it in like a legacy way, that they could probably get away with it. But yeah, I mean, look, we've talked a lot about the Hall of Fame. We talked about who we think shouldn't be in there, who we think should go in there. There's always going to be a debate about certain people. Should they ever go in? Should they not? We're not going to get into that, but you know, it's just the Hall of Fame just isn't the same anymore, yeah, as it once was. But you know, it is what it is, and unfortunately, there's nothing me or you can do about that. So, but anyway, I think that's where we're gonna end. I went over a bit of what I actually wanted to do, but yeah, um, I hope you all enjoyed the stream today. A bit of WrestleMania talk, Hall of Fame talk. We did talk about the Oasis induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as well as New Order, Joy Division, amongst others as well. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow we'll be doing a watch along of WrestleMania 17. I'm not sure what time I'm going to start that yet, but I will. It'll likely be between 10 and 11. That's what I'll put them times out there, and I shall see you tomorrow for that. Looking forward to watching through that. And yeah, enjoyed the stream. Glad that I came back and did this one. And yeah, from from tomorrow onwards, there's going to be some lengthy streams. It's going to be it's going to be a long one, but I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and we shall speak to you tomorrow for the WrestleMania 17 watch along. Bye bye.